Propaganda is essential to any military campaign. Black people tend not to understand propaganda. And the reason why we tend not to understand propaganda is because the propaganda channels, the mediums, the conduits, the radio, the television, the newspaper, we tend to just treat as forms of entertainment. We don't see them as military strategy. When there's a movie depicting black people in a negative image, when there's caricatures in the newspaper making jokes about black people, we tend to just see it as political entertainment. We don't see it as laying the foundation before the storm. That's exactly what they did in Wilmington. You always seek to create a context that allows your military campaign to be acceptable. There's always context. You study Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. He had a propaganda campaign that lasted over a year before he began to physically oppress the Jews. He had to make sure that the national mindset had been conditioned to accept the extermination to come. In Wilmington, North Carolina, the same exact thing happened years before Nazi Germany. Through the magazines, through the radio, through word of mouth, through stage play, they created negative images of black people in the minds of white folk in case there were any liberals who would have been against what they were going to do. They were slowly able to reform their opinion by constantly repeating negative information about the target population. See, the one thing about the brain that we got to understand is the creature of repetition. Whoever has the most access to the brain rules the brain. It's all about volume, not quality. The more you tell people that a certain group of people are no good, the more you show images, the more you show sounds, song, poem, dance, projecting negative information about a people, sooner or later the subconscious begins to get conditioned automatically, because you can't turn off the subconscious to what it sees and what it hears. Sound and image, you cannot stop it except to stay away from it. So sound and image are critical to any propaganda campaign because they help lessen the defenses of anyone who may be against what you're trying to do. It's the same thing happening right now. There is a direct assault on the image of the black man and woman internationally. So when mass incarceration, homicide takes place, nobody cares what's happening to black folk because they've already been conditioned to believe that these people are better off dead anyway. So propaganda is the first stage of military warfare. Right now, we're being set up for another extermination campaign. It's going to be worse than what went on in Wilmington, Tulsa, Charleston, Rosewood. It's going to be worse. Whenever the propaganda gets worse, then you know the extermination is going to be that much worse, because you see how far the exterminator had to go in order to condition the people to prepare them for the carnage to come. The Wilmington victims, the blacks who suffered as a result of the race riots of Wilmington 1898, are owed compensation. Their descendants are owed that compensation. Why? Because that was a coup d'etat. That Wilmington race riot was the first and probably the only time in American history where a municipal government was overthrown by the citizenry. You've never had that before. It was a coup d'etat. Coup d'etats are military. So since the government was changed through military force, and because the community was destroyed through military force, reparations are owed by the municipal government for doing nothing about it, the state government for not intervening, and by the federal government for watching it and doing nothing about it at all. So yes, they are owed reparations. Without a doubt, they are owed reparations. And it is important that as they work to calculate the amount of money that they are owed as a result of the Wilmington massacre, they need to make sure that they include psychological damages as well. When we talk about reparations, a lot of times we don't talk about the psychological cost of trauma, the psychological cost of the riots, the psychological cost of losing your family, the psychological cost of being run out of town. I would submit to you that the psychological costs of the Wilmington race riots of 1898 may be more excessive than the financial costs. Because when you talk about psychological pain, you can't really put a dollar on that. You could put a dollar on the business. You could put $1 on how much the home was worth. You can't really put $1 on how much my pain was worth. So as the brothers and sisters in Wilmington form that legal team, and I hope they form a legal team of sincere attorneys and consultants, because a lot of black people are going to want to swoop in as you bring this issue to the forefront. A lot of black people are going to want to swoop in, and then they're going to want to do what? Create a niche for themselves within the reparation movement so they can get paid. And if the blacks in Wilmington are not careful, if the descendants of those who suffered this are not careful, much of the reparations will get paid out through capitalistic, selfish Negroes who hustled the struggle. It is also important that as they come up with the list of requirements for reparations, that they don't be too quick to look for a financial payout. Instead, they should look for unlimited access to certain services and total control over certain industries. When you talk about reparations, because the cost of the trauma was so extensive and unending, the payment that is to be received, your compensation, should also be excessive and unending. You see, what if black people never had to pay a property tax as a result of having their property taken? That's perpetual, forever. What if our children automatically had free access to the universities in the state? Forever. That's perpetual. What if we were given exclusive right to certain industries within the state? What if we were given exclusive control over certain lands within that city? That's perpetual. Be careful about money. Money runs out. And because we don't have a self-sustaining economic community, if they were to give the black descendants of the victims of the Wilmington race riots a financial payout, white people know through economic science that that $1 trillion will be back in their hands in 25 years. Why? Because you have no businesses of your own in which to spend it. So we have to be very strategic with our war for reparations, because if we're not careful, white people will give you the money in one hand and take it all back in the next, because you don't have independent institutions in which to sustain yourself.